But my philosophy is very simple. When you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, say something, do something, get in trouble, good trouble, necessary trouble.
Strength and solidarity. The strength and solidarity. Divided is our nation, combating and fighting hatred. The mission, should you choose to accept it, is fighting racist. Psychology is just a space where we run in our simulations. We load you up with the tools, then we plug you into the matrix. So have a seat on the couch, now tell me your situation. Take a look in the mirror, be honest, just who you facing. Marginalized as a youth, what challenges were you faced with? Feeling you wasn't equal, told that you wouldn't make it. Your ID isn't real, got you constantly trying to fake it. Hiding behind mask in the closet till you can't take it. Getting harder to breathe, someone choking you on the pavement. Unspeakable violence attacking you cause you Asian. Accomplices we accomplish through collaboration, engaging, educating, evaluating one another, liberating the future of all our sisters and brothers, empowering, elevating all communities of color. Strength and solidarity. The strength and solidarity.
The Strength and Solidarity podcast is a conversational piece that invites scholars, community activists, leaders, artists, and entrepreneurs to discuss their work as accomplices in cultivating cross-racial ethnic solidarity. Hosted and produced by Pooja Mami Dana and Dr. Dana Deminari, our podcast team also includes our podcast interns, Alexis Rios and Petra Zabroga. The Strength and Solidarity podcast strives to engage, educate, evaluate, and empower communities of color one episode at a time. Our guest today features Dr. Helen Hsu. Dr. Hsu is Director of Outreach, Asian American Specialist, and lecturer at Stanford University. She is president of the American Psychological Association Division 45, Society for the Study of Race, Culture, and Ethnicity. A past president and fellow of the Asian American Psychological Association, and past chair of the Training Advisory Committee at the American Psychological Association Minority Fellowship Program, and committee member on sexual orientation and gender expression. She is a bicultural and bilingual clinician whose work has focused primarily on intersectional diverse communities, culturally responsive treatment, parenting education, school-based clinical services, grief and loss, and the mentorship and leadership training of psychology students. Dr. Hsu is on the advisory board for the JED Foundation, which focuses on teen and young adult suicide prevention. She has been recognized with the Cultural Responsiveness Professional Award by the Alameda County Mental Health Advisory Board and the Okura Community Leadership Award. She is the founder of Hela Mental Health, which provides training and consultation for clinical organizations and corporate and entertainment clients. Hi, Dr. Helen. Thank you so much for being on our podcast today with Dr. Donna and I. So nice to have you here.
Great. It's so great to see both of you. Thanks for having me.
Lovely to see you.
So we'd like to begin by you telling us about your journey towards becoming a clinical psychologist.
Long story short is that I actually was not one of those students who knew exactly what I wanted to do. But in my first Psych 101 class, I started to realize that this was a topic that felt easy, and not easy because the content was easy, but easy because I was so interested. So that started the first of many, many psychology classes. And that's kind of the journey that I got on. I sort of found out later that to do what I wanted, I had to go to grad school, which had not been in my original plan. But followed that path and have been very, very happy with the clinical psych career. Although the longer I do this work, the more I feel like everyone I like working with is a community and counseling psychologist rather than a clinical psychologist. But we can all work together.
What was your original plan?
At the time I was training, it seemed like, well, I would just see patients in a clinical setting full time. And that would be it. And maybe do assessments, and that's what clinical psychologists do. But working in community-based organizations, on internships and my first postdoc job, coordinating school-based services, and then also my first job, they were like, okay, so you're going to be a supervisor. And I had not really thought about that, but really realized I love teaching and supervision, and then really realized that community work and these other systems work was so important, because individual interventions were going to be really limited if my clients were still dealing with poverty and dangerous environments and racism and sexism and all these other things. So the other work became a part of what came out of clinical.
I'm really happy how you shared earlier that, we all need to work together. And that's also just the theme of our podcast also, that there is strength in solidarity. And really happy also that you are a supervisor and you teach, because that's how I met you. And you've instilled that in me as well, in making me understand the importance of community and like resources and things like that. So can you also share with us how your leadership journey began?
Yes, I think this is important. A lot of my mentees or early career folks will say things like, well, I don't know how you start getting involved. And I didn't either. It's true what they say about networking and knowing people is important. But, I didn't go to a famous school. I went to professional school. But just kind of being, if you're going to watch Hamilton, like being in the room where it happens, but putting yourself in places where the work that you think is important happens. So while I was at CSPP, which at the time was in Alameda, the Asian American Psych Association convention was coming to San Francisco. So we had a small student org called the Asian Forum, a Pan-Asian group. A lot of us volunteered at the convention. And so that really was my introduction since I was a graduate student. I've talked about the fact that Christina Ajima Hall, Reiko Hama-True were presidents of AAPA when I was a student. I didn't realize then that that was actually unusual, that they were the first women presidents. But so for me, it was so valuable, that modeling that, like, here are these women clinical psychologists, they are leaders, and that we joined this org, and there were roles for us to volunteer, but also start to get to know people. And there were mentoring sessions. That's always a part of these orgs. And so it grew from there, right? And then other organizations like the Minority Fellowship Program, I didn't apply when I was a student. I doubt I would have been chosen. Plus, I didn't even really know about it. But they have a Psychology Summer Institute, which is a week long, which includes early career psychologists. And that was life-changing, just the people I met through that. And so every step kind of led me more into Division 44, 45, 35.
I love that there is that connection between the three of us, alliance connection.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Like I was also a graduate of Alliant, but in the Fresno campus. So I love that. And by the way, congratulations on becoming the current president of Division 45, Meta President, and I'm so excited for your leadership. I'm especially excited about your presidential theme. I've never heard of that term before until you wrote it in the listserv. So I kind of want you to talk a little bit about that. What was the process in terms of how you came up with that presidential theme?
Mm-hmm. I joke about Kevin Coakley utilizing like my life's work theme, but it's all of our life's work, right? Which is strengthening solidarity, cross-culturally, cross-discipline, all of those ways that it's essential that we actually work together if we share the same values, which I think all of us in this space do, about wanting to support healing and justice and inclusion. And so when he talked about strengthening solidarity, and I was really thinking about an overarching theme for just continuing the work that I think is very valuable, which also includes communicating psychology in a way that actually reaches real people outside of academia. As someone that was working in the streets and cities and schools of communities, that's always been something I saw as lacking in psychology, was our communities don't really care or benefit that much, or they benefit many, many, many years later from what's published in the journals. So we're doing all this great work, but how is it serving our community? And also, some of our great wisdom in our ancestral cultures is just being wildly appropriated in psychology. It's taken out of context, not always respectfully. It's being marketed as some like new discovery, as opposed to like, some of these contemplative practices, mind-body awareness practices, emotional modulation practices. They've been around for thousands of years for people of the golden majority. So the initiative overall is Rematriate Psychology, and I have to give credit to Indigenous activist groups who are doing the work of rematriation. And that often refers to land back, but also preserving cultural practices through future generations. And in my process, I'd also been thinking about how there's a lot of efforts now for countries and cultures to repatriate stolen belongings. So museum pieces, things like that. And yet I don't love the word repatriate. And I was sitting with that and thinking about that. And repatriation is a lot about transferring the belonging or ownership. But I see rematriation as being more about really healing and cultivating that kind of care rather than just ownership. And so things that fall under rematriation include strength and solidarity, is still the warrior's path that Art Bloom had started, is still encompassing the work of radical healing. It's sort of how that connection between the ancient wisdom and all the knowledge and care that we do know, reclaiming that. And also, how do we communicate that and make it relevant for communities and policymakers? So putting it in action.
Do you have any specific goals to fulfill that presidential theme?
A lot of it is really just lifting up the amazing work that is being done by many of our members. We are already planning for APA convention in August. And I have sort of a ancestors to influencers sort of invited panel in mind of some of our elders and their amazing work, and also some of our current leaders who are really experts at communicating and reaching people in modern channels, right? And how do we kind of make those connections and bridge that gap and share that info in ways that, again, are not so much in journals like, will we publish a paper? Maybe, but that's actually less important to me than actually getting this out there and in front of grad students, early career folks, and our communities at large.
Oh my gosh, this is really exciting. And I can't wait to see you in person, by the way, because it sounds like it's decolonizing, psychology.
It's very much decolonizing the field, right? And in line also with Dr. Tama's APA initiative, right, which is supporting this idea of psychology for the people. Yeah, decolonize and liberation psychology. Like, how can it be a tool for actually lifting up this kind of ancient wisdom for healing, as opposed to, as we all know, has historically very often been a tool of categorizing people, oppressing people, gatekeeping, and really appropriating, if not negating, a lot of the wisdom and healing methods that do work really well for most of our communities.
How do you think we can apply this concept of rematriation, especially with what's going on in our society, with certain states where, they are gatekeeping what should be taught in schools? There's a lot of harm that's done to many marginalized communities. How can we actually, apply that to better serve these communities?
It is overwhelming. I think the times that we
Yeah.
live in, I think we have to really acknowledge that. I have a different talk called sort of like living in unprecedented times. And I think we're all really tired of living in unprecedented times. We're exhausted,
Yeah.
right? In so many ways. But as for racism, that is kind of the function of racism, right? It exhausts us. And so part of it is sharing this knowledge and having us think about, first of all, you have allies and accomplices. So not needing to feel like we have to do all the things all the time. And then doing work, there's like immediate, medium, and then long-term work, right? Immediate sometimes is that clinical piece. I just need safety. I just need grounding skills. Very immediate. Medium term are like self-care, community care. What are the methods that we can use to maintain and protect health and repair when damage has been done? But the long-term work is systems type work and advocacy work and policy that, I don't know how you feel, but I feel like sometimes we get educated as if policy or politics should not be talked about.
Yeah.
As if we could only do clinical or healing work, as if we're not going to be influenced by what's going on in the world, as if our clients are not afraid right now as their rights are under attack. So I think that has also been an unnatural rift. One of the things Division 45 and multiple other divisions are planning this year are a series of webinars for researchers on how to do policy-oriented research, right? So again, you're doing all this great work, but how do you make it relevant and helpful in the real world? That one of our colleagues doing research that informs, say, a member of Congress and their bill will have a potential impact for many, many, many of our individual clients.
Yeah.
So those are some of the ways kind of thinking about how do we do this. And, no one can do all the pieces. So each of us sort of has a role.
Mm-hmm. Do you have, or have you thought about possibly reaching out to other disciplines? Because for me, in some of my research work, I reach out to my colleagues and friends who are public health folks, because they're very good in working in the policy part in my research, where I mostly focus on theories and concepts and clinical stuff, right? How do you think we can include our colleagues, our accomplices in other disciplines?
Yes, very much right now, public health is someone we've already been working with, like at AAPA in the COVID-19 research, really dealing with sort of health inequity and social factors, determinants of health. Our colleagues in education, right? Really, you have to affect systems in order to really make changes in school systems and such. And I think in a lot of our spheres, I think APA still struggles with this quite a bit. Are we giving proper respect and inclusion to our colleagues who are in social work, say, or LPCs and MFTs? That there's been a lot of, again, very sort of capitalistic hierarchy in psychology and in psychiatry, a lot of gatekeeping. And are we able to branch out and utilize that? I feel like, having been trained in a community health setting, that's always been assumed to me. These are valuable colleagues with valuable experience that is equal, just different. But that is definitely, honestly, not the attitude of a lot of psychologists and professional orgs. And it's to our own detriment.
I think it's also been really hard, just as a clinician working with clients, from these communities, like from the transgender community or like the disabled community, and in real time, being worried about like their family members in these different states, or just even being worried about their future. And you're absolutely right. We need to start making the changes in our own communities, in our own spaces. And I like how you broke it down into what's immediate, what's medium, and like what's long term. I'm just also wondering, how do you really take care of yourself? Because you have many roles that you hold in your life as like a teacher, a supervisor, all these different leadership positions that you're in. So how do you keep going? And how do you still have the energy to continue advocating for all of us and for our community?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the self-preservation is essential for all of us. I often talk about there's a season for all things, right? We have very fruitful seasons, and then we have ones that we're not going to be, and we need to be okay with that. Like I've often told people, the work will always be there in our lifetime. Unfortunately, that is unfortunately, that is guaranteed, right? And so there's not a need to feel like any one of us can or should do all the things immediately. I do feel fortunate that from the get-go, I feel like I have found people with shared values. I know that is not the case for everyone's institution or workplace. And that has been critical, to feel like we're working really hard, but I actually like these people. I actually feel that we share a higher goal. And that is helpful. I've shared in other settings too. Also, my body basically told me when I was in grad school that I was not living a sustainable lifestyle and had severe gastritis for a long time, and really taught me to have to sit down and figure out, like, what's my pace? How do you take care of your mind, body, and spirit? Because this is a long haul. I think some of the concepts of rematriation also include that, right? Like, what are the mind, body, spirit community practices that have sustained people for generations that individualistic, capitalistic ways of being have sort of led us to lose touch with, and getting recentered in that. So I think the support is important. Finding the work that I actually value has been important. Pacing things. And then I was just giving a talk earlier today for another department at Stanford about, and don't leave out like levity and humor and creativity. It's so essential. It's a very, again, capitalistic point of view that I feel like a lot of people think that if I'm not good enough at my hobby to make money, then that's wasting time. And that's absolutely not true. Every culture, everywhere in the world has humor and creativity and arts and things like that. And they serve a really, really important value in protecting ourselves, expressing ourselves, sharing things that are not just the stuff that can be monetized in some way. So I think also that, right, like figuring out where your values are, and that they're not in my titles or things like that.
I'm actually curious, what do you do for fun and that's creative?
I like writing quite a lot. I like outdoorsy things quite a lot. I greatly admire visual art, although again, it's like no talent, but I'll just do it for fun. I once walked in a sort of a local art gallery that was doing a themed show about interpretations of like the superhero figure as a concept. And I just sort of on a whim submitted something like as a concept, and they're like, yeah, you're in. So like kind of on their opening thing, having a bit of a show. And I remember showing up and the woman's like, oh, and you're one of the artists checking in. And I was like,
that is awesome.
Can I call myself that? And I said, more like a frustrated artist. And she said, oh, honey, aren't we all? And yeah, you're right.
That is awesome. I would like to see that.
Yeah. Maybe we'll put that up. Yes. And the writing. I'm working on a writing right now, which is a clinical self-help workbook. But I'm hoping when that one is done to do something that is a little more on the creative bent.
That's awesome.
But we're supposed to model, right? I mean, I will add that that is a struggle. There's so much to do. we also have families and lives, and we're supposed to be role models. But I take that very seriously. I work very hard. I play very hard. Absolutely love food. But I'll remember once I had a client who was extremely, extremely ill, multiple hospitalizations, like a lot of delusions, psychotic symptoms, just really struggling. And I worked with this person for a long time. And I remember one day, despite all the symptoms and delusions and everything, she turned and looked at me and she goes, you don't look so good. Like, I don't
Wow.
like you're getting enough rest. And I was like, oh my God. She was so right. And I thought, yeah, I have to live what I am trying to teach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Dr. Donna, so before like COVID times, like Dr. Helen spoke about the mind, body, and like energy aspect of it. So she would actually like host fundraisers at her gym, and it would be tailored to like mental health. And we would all like go work out for like a good cause, and we'd have like trainees and like other professionals and like her gym community, be there for raising awareness for like mental health. And it was called Strength Against Stigma, the event.
That is awesome. I wish I was there, the West Coast now.
Right. And we may revive it someday. But really, it's like, how do we, because I care so much about this, that part doesn't feel like work. Right. And I feel like doing mental health education is something we do for work, but it's also something that we have to do in our own communities.
Right.
That a lot of our communities have become so separated from holistic health that we've become very stigmatizing, and that often people we care about and our families will say very hurtful or ignorant things. And that it's important that we always carry that frame of like, we're not perfect and we will mess up too. But also, hey, did you know there's a new term that you shouldn't call people that? And this is what this is, Yeah.
Yeah, we're constantly learning, and, it starts with ourselves and it starts with our community. And, earlier when we spoke about your theme, we kind of spoke about how we have that ancestor lens, and we really want to pay homage and respect to our ancestors and our elders, and really honoring traditions that have existed for many thousands of years, before some of these interventions came about in the field of like Western psychology. So I'm currently focusing my dissertation on like honoring, Vedic culture, like studying yoga, pranayama, and meditation. So I'm just curious to understand, we know that a lot of Western psychology has been based on Eastern perspectives and Eastern like spiritual practices and mind-body practices. So with your presidential theme, how is it that we can honor, our roots, our ancestors, our elders in, I can't pronounce that word.
Rematriation.
Yeah, rematriation.
Yes, it really is living it, right? Like just lifting up people's work. I mean, that alone, right? Like giving people our stories back is huge. Viet Thanh Nguyen, the author, talks a lot about thickening our narratives. That he talks about as a Vietnamese American growing up, the only time you heard about Vietnamese people was always the Western sort of invader's eye. Right? When you think about it, the only movie characters, they were the background people, the refugees, the casualties. You didn't hear about their resilience, their creativity, their survival, their families, their love, their practices. And there is a lot of reclaiming that. We had a fantastic student who had done work on the South Asian community and talking about how a lot of our students at Stanford, they are sort of has this Western lens of thinking, oh, my parents' culture or my home culture is really homophobic and sort of backwards. And she had done research that if you went back far enough, no, that wasn't our actual culture, that a lot of that moralizing came in with colonialization, you know. And so Marissa Floro at the Weiland Health Institute at Stanford, like she's been talking a lot about like queering, she has a Queering the Ancestors project, you know, but it is a lot about helping people kind of regain wholeness and knowledge that actually even knowing who we are has been stolen from many of us and formally schooled out of many of us. And there's something incredibly healing about that. Like when people talk about things like imposter phenomenon, right? It is usually because they are trying so hard to feel like they have to fit into this extremely industrial Western mold that they somehow feel less than, where actually, if you really look at the larger world history and narrative, you have everything you need. But how do you use it, right?
Yeah. I love that. And it also just kind of also reminds me a little bit about narrative therapy and how, you know, as a clinician of color, that's something I'm always drawn towards because I feel like it really helps our clients of color rewrite their story, reclaim their voices, and understand their strengths in their healing journey and being proud of that. So I'm glad that you shared with us how that could happen and how that's already happening in some of your leadership endeavors that you are part of.
Yeah, storytelling is a worldwide custom, and it's how most people of the global majority have passed on wisdom. And yet we're in a field where storytelling, like qualitative work, for example, or data is somehow seen as not as good as statistical analysis, even though we know that statistical analysis pretty much forces very complex things, takes like a teeny slice out or crams them in a box, you know. So how badly we do need both to actually understand, like, how do people or communities heal?
Yeah.
Or even how we assess. Joyce Chu at Palo Alto University, you know, has been doing great work, for example, on the ways that we've assessed, for example, traditionally for suicidality, that a lot of those measures or signs don't look the same for Asian Americans. Right? So we're completely missing a group who expresses their despair or suicidal ideation completely in a different manner.
Do you think with that, just to expand more on that, do you think we need to have different assessments for various ethnic groups within the Asian American umbrella? Because I know that people tend to lump all of us into this one homogenous group, right? Even though there's so many varying groups that make up Asian American with different practices, different worldviews. I'm wondering if that's the trend that we're going towards.
Ideally, yes, right? The more choice and the more tools and wisdom we have, the better for a person to figure out like what is the fit for them. And I think we are all growing this. Like, for example, a few years back, Division 45 started the conversation about adding Middle Eastern, North African sort of identified people as a separate group and space for them to really share their own knowledge and struggles. And with Evie Garcia, our previous Division 45 president, with Evie Garcia and Kevin Coakley and myself, you know, last year we'd actually made the decision to separate out Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander peoples from Asian American. Because that for the entire history of 45 has been glommed together, and knowing what we know now, that is completely different and separate, and they deserve their own time and space. So I think we are continuing to evolve and learn. And then how do we adapt? But because the point is, the more knowledge we have, it only improves sort of our ability to know what might be the best healing tools, assessment tools.
Yeah.
Research tools. Yeah.
Data disaggregation. It's a huge thing. Yeah.
I mean, I think it even, you know, we have definitely many versions of, you know, these different like cognitive assessments, personality assessments that are revised every year. and we're talking about being more inclusive. So I'm also really hoping that, earlier you spoke about like community and consultation from these different professions, right? So I'm really hoping test developers also can hire like consultants like from our like psychology associations, because we have so many psychologists, like maybe from like Division 45, AAPA, and like ABPSI, and like our other psychology associations, to really consult on inclusivity of diverse racial ethnic backgrounds in revising some of these tools.
Mm-hmm. And how it really matters, right?
Yeah.
You can actually spend a lot of effort or resources on something that is either completely not helpful or worse, maybe actively harmful, right? Like when people have a negative experience with therapy or become misdiagnosed. So being able to do that. I mean, I think about one example was AAPA, the Asian American Psychological Association, being given funds and asked to do policy-informed research during pretty much during lockdown, during COVID-19. That's what we were doing. But that most of us that happened to be in the executive committee at that time were of East Asian descent, and we really had to make an effort to make sure that there was an NHPI partner, that there was a Southeast Asian partner to be looking at the data and giving input. Otherwise, we knew it would be incomplete and inaccurate.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that, because we need to also really think about like who's not in the room and not just think about who is in the room, and try to represent everyone. And, if we're not able to do that, there are steps and methods you can use to make sure that happens. So thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, as we are, thinking about your presidential theme, and we've spoken a lot about that. So I guess we have like some concrete ways of, like changes in policy, conference planning, collaborating with other professionals. What are some other ways you're hoping that, your theme and initiative can be also accomplished by?
Mm-hmm. There's sort of a constant piece of moving people into leadership as well. That the changes, especially in APA as a whole and the larger psychology discipline as a whole, are quite slow, but we have had several presidents in a row now who do share community grounded values. And there are more and more BIPOC or people of the global majority in leadership positions. If you go to APA council meetings, it is still by far a small group within the larger long-term leadership. But moving people into this space, right? That I see so many really bright and talented people who don't have enough confidence or support to start getting involved. And so making sure that there's like different sized pieces that people can get into, because I also understand that like we are in an extremely stressful time in terms of people's energy and economic ability and all these things. But right, like maybe you can't volunteer to chair a committee or an initiative or something, but you could volunteer like one day at a conference as a starting point, or you could maybe apply for the 1 week that is MFP Summer Sci, or just really moving people into leadership who may not have ever been properly educated and trained to think of themselves as leadership material, whatever that is, right? Which is a very loaded cultural and I think, again, a gatekeeping term.
Yeah.
No, I'm really glad you said that, because you've taught me so much about leadership, and if I hadn't met you, I wouldn't have known how to begin that journey. And it did also start with conference planning for myself. And something that I also think graduate schools can be better at doing is talking about these different psychology associations for their students of color. And I'm actually hosting an event next week for my intercultural awareness development class where I'm collaborating with my student leaders of Division 45, and we're visiting the class and we're talking to the students about how can they get involved in leadership as student leaders in Division 45. And, when I was in school, thankfully, through my supervisor and through networking, I was able to understand that. And it's really important that we understand how we can get involved. And I like how you said there is no starting point. Many of the times we're not going to know how to do that. But if, you don't try, or if you don't put yourself out there, then it's always going to be that way.
Yeah, it is. And you explore. I've also said before, I've been in some spaces where I tried it and I'm like, meh, yeah, these are not my people, and then try something different. But yes, actually giving people the opportunity to explore the ways that you do this work. There's another piece about rematriation, which is when we think of matriarchy, right? We generally think of mothers and families. And I'm very open that I'm a merely child-free by choice person. But rematriation is about healing and generations. And I often say, I've realized at this point in my life, I'm like, oh, I'm like an academic and clinical grandmother, which is a little scary, but it's absolutely amazing and is probably the most important work I've done, that there are people I've helped develop who are doing amazing things in the world, right? And in a matriarchy, it's about healing and you give things away, and it's a very non-competitive way of doing things that I've had people tell me they were very surprised when I lifted up their work in a conference presentation that I gave or whatever, because they're used to being backstabbed or having people treat them as competition. And I just don't see this work as being competitive. If this is healing work, then we make space for the variety of all that all of us are doing. And that is a collectivistic family type-ish value.
Yeah, that definitely resonates with me. And I've admired you from afar. I haven't had a really, the privilege to really, talk to you the way Pooja has, but would love to meet up with you during the conference this August.
Yes.
But yeah, I really, that type of leadership, truly resonates with me, where you're uplifting everybody else. Because I am the type of leader, what Gigi had said in a previous podcast, a reluctant leader. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I feel that because of the love of my community and because of the need that we have, I do want to step up. And, just help out how I can. Mm-hmm. But my way of helping is to highlight everybody else, and I'm okay with being the last one. And when you were talking, as you were talking, that type of leadership truly resonates with me.
Yes. And you've been doing it and already well on this road, right? But there is a role of being the weaver of networks and sharer of knowledge, giving people tools.
Yeah.
That I think is very important. That unfortunately, there are many of us who are people of the global majority or BIPOC who have adopted that sort of capitalistic, oppressive way of getting ahead in our careers and don't mind stepping on others to get where they are. And, I feel like that gets you to a certain point, and then what? What have you lost? And then you don't have this healthy network and legacy of work. And do you lose yourself?
Yeah. I think that relationship is truly important. The older that I get, and the more that I'm entrenched in, AAPA and with all of these other organizations, it's the relationships that are very important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also think it goes back to, even though the three of us might be, I know in society, we are identifying as Asian Americans, or we fit under that larger bracket. but, like we're from different ethnic backgrounds within that community. And I think it also speaks volumes to, like generationally, like how we've been raised from our family system and from our elders, and that value we hold on community and healing and respect we have for one another. And I really appreciate how you said it should not be competitive, because in my few years of leadership, I have seen that in different spaces I've been in. And I've always been the youngest leader in those spaces and have witnessed that. And it's not just in in leadership roles, but I've also noticed that, in a classroom setting, like, in like clinical programs and like practicum sites. And I think it's really important to take a step back and also understand that, we are continuing that oppression Olympics that is created based off like white supremacy and larger like oppression. And we're perpetuating that intergenerational trauma, not just for our generation, but also for future generations to come. So appreciate how you went back to leadership and how, even young leaders, we are the future of the field, and it's important to be part of this change.
Right. That we're all future ancestors too. And what do you want to do with that? Right. And being a reluctant leader, there was a student who asked a panel of many leaders in APA, like, when did you decide that you were going into leadership? And we all just kind of sat there for like an uncomfortably long time, like, And to the point, the person asking was like, are you kidding me? Like, there's literally like, I think there were like 10 leaders and MFP about it. And I finally said, I don't think any of us really sat down and said, like, I'm going to be a leader. As Donna said, I think all of us see ourselves as doers.
Mm-hmm.
That we all sat around and looked around and said, somebody needs to do something about blah, blah. And then at some point you realize, like, I'm somebody and I guess I should do something, right? That I do think most people tend to sit back and want somebody else to fix things. And that's just not how anything ever gets done, right? That it takes advocacy and community to ever actually change anything. So that's when you realize, like, okay, I guess I'll do like my little part. And hopefully that brings you into an organization with like-minded people.
Yeah, it's like the inspiration, behind like our podcast music, where we truly believe that Dr. Donna and I talk about this a lot, but like, getting in like that good, necessary trouble.
Yes. Because if no one's ever mad at you, you're probably not doing anything significant.
That's so true. I get in trouble a lot.
Yeah. It's like, okay, I take feedback and I reflect on it. But the fact is, if you're doing something significant, someone is always going to complain. And
right.
And especially for women leaders, I think a lot of us are socialized since we're probably infants, right? To try and be likable and not upset people. So it can be really difficult. But knowing that someone will always complain, and my thing is always, I'm happy to hear feedback and complaints, but please give me your suggestion or do something about it, right?
I love that.
Yeah, like contribute to solving the problem. If people just want to complain and not do anything, okay, I have no time for that. That's not helpful.
Right.
But for those who have a different idea or different path, then I absolutely encourage them. Like, yes, then you should run for leadership and you should implement your ideas and let's go for it.
Yeah, that's kind of been the theme of some of our like leadership meetings in AAPA. And Dr. Donna, now you know where I get it from.
I love it.
Because I love that. I love that, like, please give us feedback, but also if you want to help and if you want to collaborate, like, how can we improve this? Or what are your
ideas,
suggestions?
Yeah.
Bring your ideas and solutions and labor and time and energy.
Yeah.
Right.
So Dr. Helen, we have one more question left for you. In thinking about what you would have told your younger self when you began your journey as a psychologist, we'd like to know, what words of wisdom do you have for graduate students currently in academia graduated students getting into teaching in academia, or students of color just getting into leadership? I know you've given us lots of words of wisdom, but anything you would have told your younger self?
I think to keep asking questions, which really has led me to many things. I ask a lot of questions, and maybe a side benefit of having the attention span of a hummingbird is I read a lot of random things, but it would be random things that would lead me to like, what's this? Oh, hey, it's MFP Summer Sci. What's this thing? You know, it's like, oh, there's a new internship site that's opening at Asian Community Mental Health. So to keep asking questions, and in an ideal world, I try not to have regrets about all the mistakes I made, and which were many because they brought me here. But I would probably tell a younger version of me, like, stop wasting time on people who are not worth it. That was a lesson I had to learn about really protecting boundaries.
Mm.
Right. So I don't think anyone ever really made it clear, like, have you thought about what your values are so you can live them? I think I had to muddle through that sort of later in life. And also, what are the skills to actually protect your boundaries of time, emotional labor, everything? Like, how do you do that? I don't think that was explicitly taught. So all those things were kind of learned in a very slow and bumpy way.
Wonderful.
I love that.
Thank
because
you.
I think that's something that many of us can relate to. And, it's constantly changing as we go through different life cycle stages and different positions we're in and different opportunities we take on. And I just want to say that we are so grateful for everything that you have done for us in AAPA, in Division 45, and just everything that you continue to do in the field. And we just so thankful for your time today, and just so happy and excited that you are going to be running Division 45 for the next year along with your amazing team. So just thank you so much for everything.
Yes, thank you so much for being such a badass woman warrior. So
I call her Wonder Woman. She's a badass Wonder Woman warrior.
Appreciate you so much.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate all of the amazing work you're doing in the podcast, social media, and all your leadership in AAPA and beyond.
Well, we have good role models.
I am looking forward to Dr. Helen Hsu, APA president.
Oh my gosh. Well, the candidacy for APA president, I think, is all official as of tomorrow. I'm not in it, let me be clear. But I think we have a very dear friend of 45 who will be up and running. So it'll be an exciting year ahead still.
Yeah. Well, we're manifesting that for the future. So
okay. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to our podcast today. We hope you enjoyed the episode. For more information about today's guests and their social media links, you can click on the description links of the episode. Pooja Mami Dana and Dr. Donna Demanarig host this podcast. Our podcast team includes our podcast interns, Alexis Rios from the University of North Texas in Denton, Texas, and Petra Zadroga from Wheaton College in Norton, Massachusetts. We also want to acknowledge our production team, David DeVito and Rachel Sheffer.
If you would like to know more about us or to watch video clips of this interview, then follow us on Instagram at APA Div 45_Presidential Task Force, on Twitter at APA Div 45_Coakley, or on YouTube and Facebook at Dr. Kevin Coakley, APA Division 45 Presidential Task Force.
Strength and solidarity. The strength and solidarity.